To cover for her cousin Leo's catastrophic mistake, my fiancée pulled the plug on my operating table. It's just one life, Ethan. Leo's young. He can't go to prison. You're taking the fall for this. Her older sister, Victoria, was even colder. You're just a stray the Vanderbilts took in. It's your duty to clean up your master's messes. Overnight, I became the internet's most hated man, a killer surgeon, a hack. I didn't fight back. I didn't apologize. Instead, on the night of our engagement party, I locked myself in the Greenwich estate and burned it all to the ground. Along with the family heirloom they cherished most, I let it all turn to ash. I heard later that my fiancée, Chloe, cried herself blind, clutching the urn with my supposed remains. But she never knew that on the day she wailed the hardest, I was sitting across a boardroom table from her, with a new face, preparing to acquire the last of her family's assets. The long, piercing beep of the heart monitor was a death sentence in the dark. The moment the surgical lights went out, I felt the world's blood rush to my head. The backup generator didn't kick in. The ventilator stopped breathing. The hemostat in my hand felt useless. I was frozen, trapped in a suffocating blackness. 5 seconds earlier, I had been performing a highly delicate coronary artery bypass. This wasn't even my patient. It was Leo Vance's, Chloe's cousin, a second-generation brat who'd had his medical license for all of 2 days. He had brought some guys back to the hospital from a club, trying to show off his skills, and had nicked a major artery. By the time they dumped the mess on me, the patient was already in shock. The backup power. Why isn't it on? I roared, my voice trembling and echoing in the sealed OR. No one answered from the darkness. Only the stifled sobs of a nurse and the clatter of a surgical tray dropped by a panicked scrub tech. Dr. Hayes, the manual resuscitator. It's not working, the anesthesiologist's voice cracked. I'm losing his blood pressure. I dropped the hemostat and scrambled for the door. I slammed it open with my shoulder. The hallway was blindingly bright. I squinted, and through the glare I saw her. Chloe Vanderbilt, my fiancée, the majority shareholder of this private hospital. She was holding the master key card to the control room. Behind her stood a nonchalant Leo and her ever-imperious older sister, Victoria. Chloe was dressed in a custom-tailored white pantsuit, her makeup flawless. It was a cruel, ironic contrast to my blood-splattered scrubs. Why did you cut the power? I charged toward them, my voice raw, like I was swallowing glass. You killed the backup too? Chloe, do you have any idea what you just done? That's a person in there. Chloe glanced at her Patek Philippe, her tone as placid as if she were discussing the weather. I know. She lowered her wrist, her gaze falling to my blood-soaked hands. She wrinkled her nose in disgust and took a half-step back. You're filthy, Ethan. Don't come near me. I froze. Filthy? A patient was dying from massive blood loss just a few feet away, and all she cared about was whether I was dirty. Turn the power back on. I lunged for the key card in her hand. We can still save him if I can just get the defibrillator working. There's no need. Victoria, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. She toyed with a slim Virginia Slim cigarette, unlit, rolling it between her fingers. She looked at me not as a person, but as a disposable tool. It's better for everyone if he dies. Victoria brought the cigarette to her nose, inhaling the scent of the tobacco. Leo was operating without proper supervision, and he caused a major hemorrhage. That's criminal negligence. If the patient lives, the family will sue. Leo's future would be ruined. A chill shot on my spine. So, I stared at them, incredulous. To cover up Leo's mistake. You're just going to murder someone? Murder? Don't be so dramatic. Leo peeked out from behind Chloe, chewing gum, a smug grin on his face. It was a medical accident. And you, Ethan, were the lead surgeon. He pointed at the name tag on my chest, his smile turning venomous. Your name is on the chart. You were the one who rushed in to save the day. Now the power's out. The patient is dead. It's a tragedy. An accident caused by our very own genius surgeon. My head snapped toward Chloe. My fiancée. We were supposed to announce our engagement next month. I was an orphan the Vanderbilts had sponsored, a charity case. To repay them, I'd studied relentlessly, becoming the best surgeon at their hospital. I did everything she asked, even giving up a prestigious position at Johns Hopkins to help her manage this place. Chloe, is that what you think, too? I stared into her eyes. She avoided my gaze, pulling a wet wipe from her purse and meticulously cleaning a spot on her sleeve where I might have brushed against it. Ethan, Leo is young. She wiped with obsessive care, as if my very presence was a contagion. He's only 22. His life is just beginning. If this gets out, how will he survive in our world? The kid on that table is 18. I pointed at the OR door, my hand shaking uncontrollably. He's a delivery guy. He's innocent. So what? Chloe tossed the wipe aside and finally met my eyes. The eyes I had once adored were now filled with nothing but cold calculation. People die in this city every day, but there's only one Leo. He's the only male heir to the Vance family line. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor, each sound a hammer blow to my heart. Ethan, don't you forget your place. She lowered her voice, speaking just for me. You were raised on our charity. We paid for your education, gave you this position, built you up into this surgical wunderkind. We didn't do it so you could play saint. Now, it's time to repay the favor. She pulled a pre-printed document from her pocket and slapped it against my chest. Blood instantly smeared the white paper. It was a legal affidavit, a confession. Sign it. Chloe's tone was absolute. Admit to surgical error. Admit that you were suffering from emotional distress and made a series of fatal mistakes. As for the power outage, that was an equipment malfunction. We'll take care of the details. I looked down at the document. Every word was a scalpel, flaying my professional soul. I'm a surgeon. I am meticulous, not just in my work, but in my principles. I don't allow for stains on my record, and I certainly don't allow my hands to be dirted by this kind of filth. And if I don't, I looked up, my voice like ice. Crack. A sharp slap echoed in the hallway. It wasn't Leo, and it wasn't Victoria. It was Chloe. She'd put her entire weight behind it. My head snapped to the side, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. Ethan, I'm informing you, not negotiating with you, Chloe said, shaking out her reddened hand. You won't sign? Do you really think you'll ever work in this industry again? One call from a Vanderbilt's, and every hospital in the country will blacklist you. You'll lose everything. Your reputation, your career, and... She paused, a flicker of cruelty in her eyes. That little trinket you're so desperate to find. I went rigid. The only clue left by my birth parents, a St. Christopher's medallion that went missing before I was adopted. The Vanderbilts had it. It was the ultimate leash she held over me. Think carefully, Victoria said, walking over. She tucked her unlit cigarette into the pocket of my blood-stained scrubs and patted my chest. I want that signed document on my desk by 8 a.m. tomorrow. Otherwise, you won't just lose your license. You'll be kicked out of our house for good. Leo whistled as he passed, deliberately slamming his shoulder into mine. Thanks, bro-in-law, he sneered, drawing out the last word with pure contempt. Take the fall like a good boy. Once the dust settles, I'll be sure to visit your grave. They turned and walked away, the sound of their expensive shoes fading down the hall. The corridor fell into a dead silence. I leaned against the cold wall, slowly sliding to the floor. The OR doors opened again. The anesthesiologist wheeled out a gurney, a white sheet covering the body. Dr. Hayes, his eyes were red. Patient confirmed deceased. I stared at the white sheet. Beneath it was a young man who should have had a life to live. Now, he was just a casualty of one family's arrogance and greed. And I was about to become the scapegoat. My hand trembled as I pulled the cigarette from my pocket. The paper was soaked in blood, and it bent, limp and broken, in my palm. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. I wanted to smash something, but I didn't have the strength to lift my arm. There was only a fire in my chest, burning hotter and hotter, charring my insides. Repay the favor? This was their idea of charity? To grind my dignity into the dirt, to shatter my life's work? And to demand I thank them for the privilege? I held up my hands, slick with the boy's blood. I'm sorry. I mouthed silently to the body on the gurney. Then I used the wall to pull myself up, one agonizing inch at a time. The window at the end of the hall reflected my image. Broken, twisted, a monster clawed back from hell. If you're going to turn me into a monster, then I'll show you what a real monster does. It was 3 a.m. when I got back to the Vanderbilt estate in Greenwich. The rain was torrential. I hadn't used an umbrella. I stood dripping in the middle of the foyer, a mixture of rain and blood pooling around me on the priceless Persian rug, staining it a dark, ugly crimson. The lights were on. No one had gone to bed. It was time for a Vanderbilt family meeting. Chloe sat in the armchair that served as a throne, swirling a glass of red wine. Leo was cross-legged on the floor, playing a video game on a massive screen, the sound effects blasting. Victoria was on the phone, impatiently telling her PR team to kill the story before it broke. No one looked at me. It was as if I were a ghost or a piece of furniture they dragged in from the curb. I just stood there, letting the cold water run from my hair into my eyes, the sting keeping me brutally awake. After 10 minutes, Leo finished his game. Damn it, lost again. He threw the controller down and finally seemed to notice me. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Our star surgeon. You look like a drowned rat. God, you're ruining the carpet. My mother had that imported from Italy. Chloe took a sip of her wine and finally looked up. Did you sign the papers? She didn't ask if I was cold. She didn't ask how I got home. Her first words were about that goddamn affidavit. I pulled the document from my jacket. It was damp and wrinkled from the rain. I placed it gently on the coffee table. The signature line was blank. Chloe's expression hardened instantly. Ethan, are you incapable of understanding English, or do you think I won't touch you? She slammed her glass down on the marble table. I can't sign it, I said, my voice eerily calm. It felt foreign in my own ears. That was murder. That patient could have been saved. You cut the power. Leo practiced medicine illegally. If I sign that, I'm an accessory. Accessory. Victoria hung up the phone and sauntered over with a cold smirk. Ethan, let's be clear. In this family, if we say it was an accident, it was an accident. If we say you did it, then you did it. The law, the truth, that's for poor people to worry about. She poked my chest with a perfectly manicured finger, each jab harder than the last. Who do you think you are? Some kind of saint? The clothes on your back, the food you eat, the car you drive, every single thing you've came from us. Without the Vanderbilts, you'd still be fighting for scraps in some group home. We're asking you to take the fall for one little thing. You owe us that. I've repaid what I owed you, slaving away for you for years. I grabbed her finger, twisting it away. It was the first time I had ever laid a hand on her. Victoria froze. Then her face contorted with rage. How dare you touch me? I perform 4 surgeries a day, with no days off. In the last few years, my work has brought this hospital over $100 million in revenue. I secured 3 federal research grants for Chloe. I've cleaned up Leo's messes more times than I can count, I said, staring her down. I don't owe you a damn thing. Don't owe us. Leo jumped up and shoved me hard. Exhausted, I stumbled back, crashing into a display cabinet. A Ming Dynasty vase wobbled and fell. Crash. Porcelain shards exploded across the floor. That vase was worth $500,000. Leo screamed, pointing at me. We could sell you and not make that back. Ethan, drop the act. You just want more money. Is that it? Fine. Sign the papers, do a few years in a country club prison, and when you get out, I'll give you $1 million. How about that? $1 million. For my life, my integrity, my soul as a surgeon. I looked at Leo's twisted, enraged face and felt a profound wave of nausea. I'm not signing. I repeated myself, then turned to go upstairs. Tomorrow, I'm going to the police. I'll tell them everything. I have a recording from the OR and evidence that the backup power was manually shut down. It was a bluff, of course. They would have wiped the security footage. I didn't have a recorder. I was betting on their fear. It worked. Chloe's voice, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the room. Stop. I paused on the stairs, my back to her. If you dare walk out that door, if you dare say a single word. Her voice was laced with venom. I'll have St. Jude's torn down. I whipped around. That home is the old director's entire life. I yelled. The director was the only person in the world, besides my parents, who had ever shown me true kindness. That's your problem, not mine, Chloe said, leaning back on the sofa, her expression languid but lethal. It's prime real estate. It should have been developed years ago. One phone call, and the bulldozers will be there tomorrow. And, it's full of helpless old people and unwanted kids. Accidents happen during relocations she didn't have to finish. She was threatening the lives of innocent children and the elderly to silence me. You're insane, I whispered. Chloe, when did you become this? The Chloe I remembered was spoiled. Yes, but she had a conscience. She used to feed stray cats in the snow. When had she become a monster who saw human lives as disposable? You forced me to, she said, rising from the sofa. She walked over and straightened my collar, a gesture of faux tenderness. Her words were poison. People change, Ethan. You're the only one still clinging to your ridiculous, outdated principles. She leaned in, whispering in my ear, sign it, or watch St. Jude's become a pile of rubble. The choice is yours. She stepped back and held up a ring. Our engagement ring. You know, I actually was going to marry you, she mused, toying with the diamond. It was a look of mild regret, but mostly of cold finality. You're handsome, you're presentable, and you do what you're told. But now, it seems this dog has forgotten its training. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the ring. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and landed in a nearby trash can. There's no need to keep up the charade. The engagement is off, Chloe announced coldly. Since you won't take the fall gracefully, I'll just have to do it for you. She snapped her fingers. Release the story, she said to Victoria. Tell the press Ethan Hayes botched a surgery, killed a patient, and is now a fugitive from justice. And leak those files on him, the ones about him taking bribes, his messy personal life. If he won't be our scapegoat, he can be a pariah. Victoria smiled, satisfied. Already done. I stood on the stairs, staring at the people I once considered my family. They were demons. My stomach churned. I gagged, but had nothing to throw up. In that moment, I finally understood. I was never a person to them. I was a tool. Useful, they kept me polished. Defective, they would destroy me without a second thought. Fine. My eyes fixed on the ring in the trash. A laugh escaped my lips, a ragged, broken sound that brought tears to my eyes. Chloe, you'll remember what you said today. I turned and walked up the stairs. Each step was heavy, but my resolve was like steel. I'll sign. I wasn't lying. I would sign something. Not a confession. Their death warrant. 3 when dawn broke. The world had changed. I was under house arrest in a guest room on the 3rd floor. The windows were welded shut, and 2 security guards stood outside my door. They'd taken my phone, but the room had a desktop computer. I could still see the world burning. 7 of the top 10 trending topics on Twitter were about me. Killer surgeon Ethan Hayes, Dr. Hayes malpractice death, Ethan Hayes bribery scandal, cancel Ethan Hayes, the Vanderbilt PR machine was terrifyingly efficient. Overnight, a mountain of fabricated evidence had appeared. Doctored text messages, blurry security footage, anonymous colleagues giving damning statements. They had crafted the perfect narrative. I, Ethan Hayes, was a fraud. A greedy, incompetent surgeon who cut corners, and when a patient died because of my mistake, I tried to blame an intern. The comments were a tidal wave of vitriol. This guy calls himself a doctor? He's a murderer. He looks so clean-cut, but his heart is pure evil. Lock him up and throw away the key. Isn't he Chloe Vanderbilt's fiancé? A gold-digging leech and a killer. A relative of mine saw him once. He was so arrogant. Guess they didn't bribe him enough. Reading the comments, I felt a strange sense of calm. No anger, no despair. Just a deep, profound exhaustion, like a drowning man who had finally stopped fighting and was letting himself sink into the abyss. This was the world I had dedicated my life to serving. These were the people I had sworn to heal. All it took was a little nudge, and they became a mob, sharpening their knives for an innocent man. Knock, knock, knock. The door opened before I could answer. Leo strolled in. He was carrying a breakfast tray, milk, eggs, bacon. A feast for the condemned. Eat up, bro-in-law. He slammed the tray down, sloshing milk onto the desk. Don't want you starving to death. The cops will be here soon, and you'll need your strength for the interrogation. I sat at the computer, motionless. The police. I looked at the screen, full of hate. You called them? Of course. Leo dropped into the chair opposite me, propping his feet on the desk. You didn't want to handle this privately, so we're doing it by the book. My sister already spoke to the police commissioner. Once you're inside, you're never getting out. He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. We took care of the patient's family, by the way. Gave them $2 million. Now, they're telling everyone you were rude and forced them to sign a waiver. See? Money solves everything. I looked at his young, rotten face. Leo, can you sleep at night? I asked. Like a baby. Why wouldn't I? He shrugged innocently. Had a great dream last night, actually. Dreamt you were in jail. My sister transferred all your hospital shares to me, and I became the new chief of surgery. He stood up and walked behind me, reading the comments on the screen. Fisk TSK. These people are vicious. He pointed to one. Ethan Hayes is human garbage. Why doesn't he just kill himself? Huh. The people have spoken, bro. He clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes filled with malice. Honestly, if I were you, I'd just jump out that window. You're already a social pariah. At least this way, you make a clean exit, right? I turned my head and looked at him, truly looked at him. My gaze must have unnerved him, because his smile faltered. What are you looking at? You got a problem. He puffed out his chest. This is how the world works. I'm a Vanderbilt. You're just some charity case we picked up. It doesn't matter how hard you work or how smart you are. To me, you'll always be the stray dog we feed scraps to. Even a dog will bite when it's cornered, I said softly. Then bite. Leo gestured wildly at the sealed window. Go on, jump. Show me. Oh, right, I forgot to tell you. The old director from St. Jude's had a heart attack. Heard he saw the news, and the shock was too much for him. A roar filled my ears. What did you say? I shot up from my chair, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. What happened to the director? Choke, let go. Leo hadn't expected the outburst. He clawed at my hands, terrified. You're crazy. Let me go. Security. The guard from the hall burst in, grabbing me and forcing me down onto the desk. My face was pressed against the cold keyboard. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the hateful comments scrolling on the screen. Leo straightened his clothes, walked over, and kicked me hard in the stomach. You ungrateful bastard, he spat. Don't worry, the old geezer isn't dead. Yet. But if you cooperate and confess, maybe I'll be merciful and pay for a nurse to watch him die. The pain buckled me. I bit my lip, refusing to make a sound. Enjoy your last few hours of freedom, Leo sneered, turning to leave. The police will be here at 8 p.m. to pick you up. Make sure you put on a good show. The door slammed shut. The room was silent again. I curled up on the floor, clutching my stomach, gasping for air. The director, the kind old man who knitted me a sweater every winter, who cried with joy when I got into medical school. He was my last tie to this world, and now they were cutting it. I slowly crawled to the bathroom. The man in the mirror was a stranger, pale, with sunken eyes and cracked lips. The brilliant surgeon was gone, replaced by a death row inmate. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. The shock cleared my head, cutting through the rage and despair. I remembered what Leo had said. If I were you, I'd just jump out that window. Death? No. Death is for cowards. I was going to make them pay. I was going to make them understand true despair, the kind where you scream and no one hears. You want me to die? Then I'll give you a death you'll never forget. I looked at my reflection, and a slow, strange smile spread across my face. The light in my eyes went out. In its place was a bottomless abyss. 8 p.m.? No, that's too late. The show starts now. For it was 5 p.m. The setting sun bled across the room, painting everything in shades of blood. The Vanderbilts were out. Chloe was at a charity gala, playing the part of the beautiful, benevolent philanthropist. Leo was at a club, celebrating his impending victory. Victoria was at the office, cooking the books. The estate was empty except for a few guards and the household staff. This was my chance. I have always been meticulously clean. Even before my own death, everything had to be in order. I took a shower, shaved, and put on a clean white suit. It was a birthday gift from Chloe. She'd probably forgotten, having had her assistant pick it out, but it was the best thing I owned. I sat at the desk and laid out a sheet of stationery. I was going to write a suicide note, but it wasn't just a note. It was a script carefully designed. The handwriting had to be erratic, conveying desperation and chaos, but the key points had to be crystal clear. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I confess, I was the surgeon in charge. But I made no mistake, and I took no bribe. The power was cut intentionally. The backup generator was disabled. But I have no proof, and no one would believe me anyway. Chloe, I love you. For you, I'll take the blame for anything. But the director at St. Jude's is innocent. Please, let him live in peace. Leo, I'm paying your debt with my life. I paused. It wasn't enough. To make this fire burn bright enough, to ensure the public backlash was absolute, I needed more fuel. From a slit in the mattress, I retrieved a micro SD card. I may have been a powerless charity case in the Vanderbilt house, but I wasn't blind. Evidence of the family's tax evasion, records of Chloe bribing public officials, proof of all the other times Leo had screwed up and been bailed out. I had copies of everything. It wasn't the whole rotten picture, but it was enough to bring them to their knees. I didn't leave the card out in the open. I hid it in the one place only Chloe knew I cherished, the small velvet-lined box where I kept the fake St. Christopher's medallion. It was a test of her humanity. If, after my death, she felt a single shred of remorse and opened that box to remember me, she would find the evidence and destroy it. But if she remained as cold and unfeeling as I suspected, then the fire would consume the box, but the fireproof, waterproof SD card would be found by the arson investigators. It was the ultimate gamble. I was betting she had no soul. With that done, I checked the time. 6:30 p.m. The sky was darkening. I walked to a display case in the corner of the room. Inside, on a silk pillow, sat the pride of the Vanderbilt family, a vintage Patek Philippe watch, a so-called family heirloom passed down for generations. It was their symbol of old money legitimacy. Victoria had put it in my room as a daily humiliation, a reminder that I was nothing more than the hired help guarding their treasures. I opened the case and took out the watch. The metal was cold against my skin. Heirloom. I laughed, raised my arm, and smashed it on the floor. Crack. The delicate machinery shattered, the glass face exploding into 1,000 tiny pieces. Still not enough. I stomped on it, grinding it with my heel until it was an unrecognizable pile of scrap metal. A wave of pure, unadulterated pleasure washed over me. Now for the final step. I had smuggled high-proof alcohol and an accelerant from the hospital lab, disguised in several innocuous-looking cologne bottles. I doused the curtains, the bedsheets, the expensive Persian rug. The acrid smell filled the air, overpowering the room's usual scent of sandalwood. I walked to the door and locked it from the inside. Then I sealed the cracks around the doorframe with duct tape. I was creating the perfect locked room mystery, a suicide scene with no questions. As for my escape, the room had a walk-in closet with a hidden ventilation shaft leading to the attic. It was a flaw from an old renovation, one only I knew about. From the attic, I could crawl to a service corridor in the adjacent wing of the house. It would require perfect timing and peak physical condition. One misstep, and I'd become a real corpse. I didn't care. I'd rather be reborn in fire than rot in their cage. I stood in the center of the room and struck a match. The small flame danced on my fingertip, reflecting in my calm eyes. Goodbye, Ethan Hayes. I said farewell to the first 30 years of my life. The obedient dog, the life-saving surgeon, the delusional fiancé. In this moment, they all died. I let the match drop. Whoosh! A wave of blue flame erupted, racing along the lines of alcohol like a ravenous serpent, devouring everything in its path. The heat was a physical blow. I turned my back on the inferno, ran into the closet, and squeezed into the narrow ventilation shaft. Behind me, the world burned. 5 as the fire consumed the estate. I watched from a dusty service corridor in the adjacent wing. Through a grimy vent, like a rat in a sewer, I witnessed my own spectacular funeral. The blaze was bigger than I'd anticipated. Blue and orange flames licked the night sky. A series of small explosions, expensive liquors and perfumes detonating, punctuated the roar. Thick black smoke coiled into the air like a dragon, blanketing the entire Greenwich hillside in a suffocating shroud. Leo's obnoxious red Ferrari was the first to arrive. He probably thought I was just having a tantrum, some dramatic cry for attention. He jumped out of the car, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his face a mask of annoyance. Ethan, what the hell is wrong with you? If you want to kill yourself, do it somewhere else. Don't burn down my house, he yelled at the inferno, filming it with his phone, likely planning to send it to his friends to mock my impotent rage. Chloe and Victoria's cars arrived next. Chloe, still in the stunning black gown she'd worn to the gala, hiked up her skirt and ran toward the blaze. She wasn't worried about me. The fire department. Why aren't they here yet? She shrieked, her voice stripped of its usual elegance. My safe. My safe is on the second floor. Of course. Her jewelry, sensitive company documents, all the blackmail material she used to control people, all in that safe. Victoria, meanwhile, was staring intently at my third-floor room, the heart of the fire. The watch, even from a distance, I could see the pain contorting her face. The Patek is in that room. Get someone in there. The charity case can die, but you have to save the watch. These were my loved ones. Faced with a raging inferno, their only concerns were property, jewels, and a status symbol. Not one of them even asked, "Where's Ethan? Is he still inside?" The world only fell silent when the sirens finally tore through the night, when the fire hoses began to tame the beast, and when a team of firefighters emerged from the smoking ruin carrying a stretcher covered by a white sheet. The body was incomplete. It was an unclaimed, badly burned cadaver I had managed to acquire from the medical school's anatomy lab. I had requisitioned it 2 weeks prior for research purposes and conveniently forgotten to return it, hiding it in the attic for this very moment. The fire had obliterated all biological markers, leaving only a charred, contorted husk. But on the finger of that husk was a simple, blackened ring. My engagement ring, the one Chloe had thrown in the trash. I had retrieved it and placed it on the finger of the decoy corpse. The moment Chloe saw that ring, her composure shattered. She swayed, as if her spine had dissolved. Ethan, she stammered, stumbling forward to lift the sheet, but a police officer gently restrained her. "Ms. Vanderbilt, I'm very sorry for your loss. The body is severely carbonized. For your own well-being, we advise against viewing the remains." The officer's voice was cold and procedural. "We found a suicide note and a data card inside a small fireproof safe near the body." A note? Chloe stared blankly, her face, usually a canvas of careful calculation, now showing an emotion I'd never seen on her before: confusion. A detective in white gloves carefully unfolded the singed piece of paper. The media, whom Leo had called to document my shameful suicide, were now the perfect, impartial witnesses. Camera flashes strobed relentlessly, illuminating every detail of the Vanderbilts' shocked faces. The detective read the note aloud. "Chloe, I love you. For you, I'll take the blame for anything. But the director at St. Jude's is innocent. Please, let him live in peace. Leo, I'm paying your debt with my life." Each word was a sledgehammer, striking the heart of every person present. The chattering crowd fell dead silent. Chloe's face turned a ghostly white, paler than the diamonds around her neck. Her head instinctively snapped toward Leo. Leo's phone slipped from his hand, shattering on the driveway. His mouth hung open, his eyes wide with terror, as if he'd seen a ghost. "No, it wasn't me," he stammered, backing away. "He's lying. He's framing me. I didn't kill anyone." But the police ignored him. A tech specialist approached the lead detective, holding up the SD card that had been salvaged from the ashes. His face was grim. "Captain, we've recovered the data on the card. It's full of backed-up audio files, videos, and a complete technical analysis of the power failure at the hospital 3 days ago, along with years of the Vanderbilt Corporation's financial records, indicating massive tax fraud." "What?" Victoria Svikith. Forgetting all decorum, she lunged for the evidence bag. "That's fake. Ethan forged all of it. Give it to me." "Restrain her," the captain ordered. 2 officers quickly subdued her, cuffing her hands behind her back against a police cruiser. "Victoria Vanderbilt, you're under arrest for suspicion of accessory to a crime, obstruction of justice, and felony tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent." "Let me go. I'm a Vanderbilt. You can't arrest me," she screamed, thrashing like a cornered animal. Chloe stood frozen, her eyes locked on the evidence bag containing the SD card. The box with the fake medallion, was where she kept the secret of my parentage. She thought it was the safest place in the world because she knew I treasured it. She never imagined I would use that devotion, that control she had over me, to plunge a dagger deep into her heart. "Ethan," she whispered, and then, without warning, tears began to stream down her face. Not tears of grief, tears of fear, and of a dizzying, sickening realization that the quiet, obedient man she could abuse at will, the man who endured every injustice in silence, had just used his own life to land the most devastating blow imaginable. I sat in the darkness of the vent, watching it all unfold. Watching Victoria get forced into a squad car. Watching Leo get cuffed, sobbing and wetting himself as he screamed for his sister to save him. Watching Chloe fall to her knees before the charred body, burying her face in her hands and letting out a choked, guttural scream. I touched my own face, still tender from the preliminary plastic surgery. I had been preparing for this day for a long time. Does it hurt, Chloe? We're just getting started. The next 3 days, the city was consumed by a bizarre, frenzied spectacle. I was dead, and I was more famous than I had ever been in life. The police released a portion of the evidence from the SD card. The rest of it, the more personal, more inflammatory content, was released to the internet through a dead man switch I had set up, detonating a nationwide scandal. The original operating room footage had been deleted, but I had restored fragments of the data. Paired with the hospital's equipment logs, it painted a damning picture. 8:15 p.m. Surgery reaches critical phase. 8:17 p.m. Leo Vance forces entry into the main control room. Chloe Vanderbilt's voice is clearly audible. Cut the power. If anything happens, it's on Ethan. 8:18 p.m. Hospital-wide power failure. Ethan Hayes is heard screaming in the darkness. Backup generator. Save him. The audio clip went viral. The same people who had called me a killer and a hack were now my most devout mourners. My Twitter account, once home to a few hundred followers, gained millions overnight. My final, scheduled tweet, "Goodbye, cruel world," became a digital wailing wall. I'm so sorry, Dr. Hayes. We were all so blind. My God, even in his last moments, he was trying to protect that orphanage and take the blame for that monster. I am crying. This is the saddest thing I've ever read. This family of vampires drove a good man to his death. At NYPD, make the Vanderbilts pay, an eye for an eye. The tidal wave of public opinion reversed course, smashing the carefully constructed facade of the Vanderbilt family to pieces. The Vanderbilt group's stock plummeted, hitting the circuit breaker 3 days in a row and wiping out billions in market value. The entrance to their hospital was buried under a mountain of flowers and candles left by mourners. Someone had even splashed red paint across the doors, scrawling the words "murderers." And I was watching all from a cheap motel room, eating cup noodles. The news was broadcasting footage of Leo's arraignment. The once arrogant heir, now with a shaved head and wearing an orange jumpsuit, looked like a ghost. He was rail-thin, with sunken eyes and a vacant stare. Facing a barrage of reporters, his usual swagger was gone. He just kept repeating, mechanically, "It wasn't me. It really wasn't. Ethan isn't dead. He's faking it." Splat. Someone in the crowd threw an egg, hitting him square on the forehead. "You scum. Still slandering a dead man. What's in head?" The crowd was a furious mob. The police had to form a human wall to get him into the courthouse. Watching Leo, pathetic and broken, I chewed on a piece of processed meat from my noodles and thought it was the most delicious meal I'd ever had. As for Chloe, she was even more clever than I'd given her credit for. Once she realized the situation was unsalvageable, she immediately rebranded herself as a victim. At a press conference, she wore a simple black dress, no makeup, looking as fragile and beautiful as a wilting lily. "I was manipulated," she sobbed for the cameras, nearly fainting several times. "I love my cousin so much my sister took advantage of my love for him. I had no idea they were going to cut the power. I loved Ethan too. He was my fiancé, the love of my life." She held up the charred, fragmented suicide note, her hand trembling. In his letter, he said he forgave me. He said he would take the blame for me. "Oh, Ethan, you fool. If you were still here, I would give up everything for you. We would get married. We would run away from all of this. It was a brilliant performance. The Academy should have given her an Oscar. If I didn't know her so well, I might have even been moved. She used my death, my love for her, to successfully distance herself from the conspiracy. She was no longer a mastermind, but a tragic woman torn apart by family loyalty. Her reputation was damaged, but she had saved herself from prison and even gained a legion of sympathetic followers. Poor Chloe. Her fiancé died, and now her cousin is dragging her down. Her sister is the real villain. Stay strong, Chloe. Watching her tear-streaked face on the screen, I let out a cold, empty laugh. Did you think it was over, Chloe? Did you think you could use my love to wash the blood from your hands? That was just the last branch I left for you to cling to. And once you've climbed as high as you can, once you think you're finally safe, I'm going to cut it myself. I turned off the TV, put on a baseball cap, and slung a backpack over my shoulder. Inside was all my savings and a one-way ticket out of the country. The name on the new passport wasn't Ethan Hayes. It was a new identity, Julian Croft. It was time to go somewhere no one knew me, to fix this face, to rebuild my body, and to amass the kind of power that could crush the Vanderbilt group into dust. I took one last look in the mirror. Even with the preliminary work, I could still see traces of Ethan Hayes in the eyes. I didn't like it. I thought of the black market plastic surgeon I had contacted, a man known for his radical, transformative work. Goodbye, Ethan. I waved at my reflection. When I come back, Ethan Hayes will be gone for good. There will only be the ghost who has come to collect his debt, Julian Croft. 3 years later, New York City, early winter. A bitter wind whipped dead leaves against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the five-star hotel. Tonight was the social event of the season, a high-profile charity gala hosted by none other than the Vanderbilt Group, which had spent the last 3 years clinging to life under the guise of medical philanthropy. The ballroom was a sea of designer gowns and hushed whispers, and Chloe Vanderbilt was still the center of it all. 3 years had made her more mature and colder. She wore a deep violet, backless gown, a staggering black diamond necklace gracing her neck. It was part of her signature brand now, the tragic, devoted widow. Even with Leo rotting in prison and Victoria a fugitive overseas, Chloe had managed to keep the family afloat through a combination of asset liquidation and shrewd social maneuvering. Ms. Vanderbilt, I hear tonight's main auction item is a manuscript left by the great Dr. Hayes. A balding tycoon asked, sidling up to her with a glass of champagne. It is, Chloe said with a sad, beautiful smile. She hid her disdain well. It's Ethan's private research on heart transplant techniques. I had a part with it. For the children at St. Jude's, of course. A true philanthropist, the man gushed. Dr. Hayes would be so proud. Proud? From my vantage point in the shadows of a second-floor VIP suite, I swirled the whiskey in my glass, a smirk touching my lips. If he were really watching from beyond, he'd probably call down a bolt of lightning to strike her where she stood, auctioning off my life's work to burnish her own tarnished image. Chloe, you never cease to find a new bottom. Mr. Croft, it's almost time, my assistant murmured behind me. The auction is about to begin. I turned, stepping into the light. The mirror reflected a stranger. A high-bridged nose, deep-set eyes, a jawline that could cut glass. The most striking feature was a thin, pale scar that sliced through my right eyebrow and disappeared into my hairline. It was a memento from the surgery, a medal I had specifically asked the doctor to leave. Over the last 3 years, I made a fortune on Wall Street, shorting pharmaceutical giants. I'd spent a year in the underground casinos of Southeast Asia, learning the most savage ways to destroy an opponent. Now I was Julian Croft, a mysterious venture capitalist with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. And I was Chloe Vanderbilt's last hope. She was desperate for a cash infusion to save her failing hospital. The infamous Julian Croft, a man rumored to have more money than sense, was her prime target. Let's go, I said, adjusting the knot of my crimson silk tie. It was the color of dry blood. Time to see an old friend. Downstairs, the auction was heating up. The auctioneer was hyping the final item. This is the life's work of the brilliant surgeon Ethan Hayes, a genius cut down in his prime. We'll start the bidding at $500,000. 600,000. 700. A few sycophantic businessmen placed bids, hoping to curry favor with Chloe. She stood beside the stage, a polite smile fixed on her face, but her eyes were scanning the crowd. She was looking for me. 10 million. A deep, resonant voice cut through the ballroom from the top of the grand staircase. The room fell silent. Every head turned. I stood there, one hand in my pocket, the other resting on the railing, looking down at them all. The scar on my brow caught the light, looking both savage and dangerously alluring. Chloe's head snapped up. Our eyes met. In that instant, I saw her pupils dilate. Not from recognition. My voice, my face, my entire presence. It was all different. She could never connect me to the meek Ethan Hayes. She was shocked by the look in my eyes. The look of a predator staring at its prey. Cold, devoid of all warmth. 10 million, I repeated, descending the stairs. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. To buy a dead man's notes. They should make for good kindling. Gasps rippled through the room. He was here to cause trouble. Chloe's composure flickered, but she recovered quickly. She glided off the stage to meet me, extending a hand in a delicate lace glove. You must be Mr. Croft. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Her voice was like honey, laced with hooks. And you have quite the sense of humor. Dr. Hayes's work is a medical treasure, hardly something to be burned. I stopped in front of her, but didn't take her hand. Instead, I took off my sunglasses, leaned in close, invading her personal space. Close enough to smell the cloying perfume she wore. Close enough for her to see the undisguised mockery in my eyes. A treasure. I let out a low, gravelly laugh. In my experience, anything that's passed through your hands, Ms. Vanderbilt, even gold, tends to carry the stench of death. Chloe's smile froze on her face. Her hand was left hanging in the air. The silence was deafening. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what the mysterious tycoon would do next. I straightened up, pulled a handkerchief from my pocket, and made a show of wiping the hand that hadn't even touched hers. Then I dropped the handkerchief on the floor. Just kidding, Ms. Vanderbilt. Don't be so sensitive. I stepped on the handkerchief and walked past her, taking the seat in the front row that had been reserved for the mayor. Continue the auction, I announced, crossing my legs, my eyes glinting with amusement. But besides these worthless notes, I'm far more interested in that hospital you own. I hear it's on the verge of bankruptcy. Perhaps you'd be willing to sell it to me? Chloe was nothing if not adaptable. After a moment of shock, she recalibrated her entire strategy. Instead of reacting to my insult, she adopted the look of a woman bravely enduring hardship for the greater good. You're quite the comedian, Mr. Croft, she said, gracefully retracting her hand and tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Business is business. If you're interested in Vanderbilt Medical, then we have something to discuss. However, her tone sharpened, her eyes becoming hard as diamonds. That hospital was my fiancé's legacy, and it is the cornerstone of my family. If you want to acquire it, it's going to cost you dearly. Money is no object, I said, leaning back and flicking open a custom Zippo lighter. The only question is whether you can handle the price. The next 30 minutes became a two-person show. Whatever was on the auction block, no matter how worthless, if Chloe showed the slightest interest, I immediately raised my paddle and outbid everyone by a factor of 10. The painting, $500,000. The jade sculpture, $800,000. That vase, $1.2 million. I threw money around like it was confetti, but after I won an item, I didn't take it. Hideous, I said, pointing to the Qing Dynasty vase I had just paid over $1 million for. I looked at my assistant. Let's hear what it sounds like. My assistant, stone-faced, picked up the vase and, in front of the horrified guests, smashed it on the marble floor. Crash! Shards flew everywhere. A piece skittered to a stop at Chloe's feet. The entire ballroom was in a state of shock. This wasn't a charity gala. It was a public execution. Chloe's face grew paler with each new act of destruction. She was finally realizing that this Julian Croft wasn't just here for a hostile takeover. This was personal, but she couldn't figure out the connection. She had run a background check. Julian Croft, orphaned, of Chinese descent, raised abroad. A self-made Wall Street phantom. No connection to the Vanderbilt family whatsoever. Why, Mr. Croft? Chloe finally broke, approaching me and lowering her voice. Have we had some kind of misunderstanding? If I've offended you in some way, no misunderstanding. I cut her off, rising to my feet. I just have a particular distaste for hypocrites. I looked her dead in the eye. Especially the kind of woman who profits from death while pretending to be a saint. Chloe's pupils constricted. A flicker of something, a memory, a fear, made her tremble. You warm up, sober. I didn't give her time to think. I turned to address the stunned crowd. I bought all that junk. Now let's get down to business. I snapped my fingers. My assistant immediately projected a thick dossier onto the large screen behind the stage. It was Vanderbilt Medical's balance sheet, along with a detailed debt restructuring proposal. Vanderbilt Medical is currently $300 million in debt. Your loans are due next week. If you can't pay, the bank will seize the hospital and liquidate its assets. I pointed to a plunging red line on the graph. Ms. Vanderbilt, rather than letting the vultures pick you apart, sell your shares to me now. I'll give you 300 million to cover your debt. And I held up a single finger. An extra 50 million for your retirement. On one condition, you resign from a board and disappear from the medical world forever. The room erupted. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a public shaming. A hostile, brutal conquest. Impossible. Chloe hissed, her face a mask of fury. Vanderbilt Medical is worth at least $1 billion. This is highway robbery. Is it? I scoffed. Ms. Vanderbilt, after that little accident 3 years ago, your hospital's reputation is in the gutter. Besides the building and the land it sits on, what else do you have that's of any value? I took a step closer. The sheer force of my presence made her retreat. And I also hear your cousin Leo isn't having a very good time in prison. If you run out of money to grease the wheels, I imagine his life could get much, much harder. The mention of Leo was a direct hit. Her defenses crumbled. It was her one true weakness. "Oh, who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking as she stared at me. "How do you know so much?" I leaned in, my lips close to her ear, and spoke in a voice only she could hear. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that when you look in my eyes, Chloe, don't you see the man you left to die outside that operating room?" Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes boring into mine. For a split second, time folded in on itself. I saw her look past the strange face, past the scar, and see the soul of the man she had destroyed, the man who had loved her, now staring back at her from the ruins. She let out a terrified scream. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor. The room was in chaos. Camera flashes lit up her broken form. I stood over her, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was what I wanted. Fear, doubt. I wanted her to see my ghost in every shadow, to hear my voice in every whisper for the rest of her miserable life. I wanted to trap her in a living hell. I extended my hand, a perfect mockery of a gentleman's gesture, while my smile was that of the devil himself. "The floor is cold, Miss Vanderbilt. Allow me to help you up." Now the next day, Chloe was in my office, right on time. She had changed her approach. The defiant queen of the previous night was gone, replaced by a woman in a perfectly tailored, modest gray suit. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked professional, capable, and slightly vulnerable. It was her classic move. When aggression failed, she weaponized her femininity. Too bad for her I was blind to it now. I stood with my back to her, facing the panoramic window, holding the acquisition proposal she'd brought. I didn't look at it. I didn't offer her a seat. The office was chilled to a precise 66 degrees. Chloe was only wearing a thin silk blouse. I could practically hear her teeth chattering as she fought to control her shivers. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice strained. "About the acquisition, I believe we can still negotiate. 350 million. That's my final offer." I turned, walked to the shredder, and fed her proposal into it. The machine whirred to life, its grinding sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "I think you misunderstand the situation, Ms. Vanderbilt," I said, picking up a cup of black coffee from my desk. I drank it without sugar now, a bitter taste I used to hate, but now required to feel anything at all. "Last night's price was 300 million. Today's price is 200. You." Chloe's head shot up, the carefully constructed facade cracking. "Julian, you can't be serious. 200 million barely covers the real estate. This is extortion." "Yes, it is," I said, taking a sip of coffee, enjoying the sight of her barely contained rage. "Don't want to sell? Fine. The door is right there." I gestured to the door and then checked my watch. "You have 5 minutes to decide. After that, I'm calling the bank to officially begin foreclosure proceedings on all of Vanderbilt Medical's assets. And by the way, I heard your cousin racked up quite a gambling debt in prison. If that doesn't get paid..." I paused, a cruel smile playing on my lips. "Prisons are dangerous places. People slip in the shower, choke on their food, or sometimes they get stabbed in the throat with a sharpened toothbrush while they sleep." Chloe swayed, grabbing her Hermes bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. It was the last remnant of her pride. "Julian, what do you really want?" she asked through gritted teeth. "This isn't just about money, is it?" "Clever girl." I put down my coffee and walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. She backed away instinctively until her back was pressed against the cold glass of the window wall. She had nowhere left to run. I placed a hand on the glass next to her head, trapping her in my shadow. I'm not interested in your bankrupt hospital, and I'm not interested in your money. My gaze traveled down her neck, lingering for a moment on her collarbone before meeting her panicked eyes. I'm interested in you. Chloe froze. For a moment, she looked stunned. Then, a wave of understanding, followed by a flicker of smug satisfaction, washed over her face. She thought I was just another man, captivated by her beauty and power. She thought this whole elaborate, cruel game was just some twisted form of courtship. Mr. Croft? Her voice softened, and she leaned forward slightly, deliberately creating a view down the front of her blouse. So that's what this is about. You could have just asked. There was no need for all this drama. She reached up, her hand aiming for my neck. I caught her wrist and squeezed. Crack. I heard the sickening grind of small bones. Ah! Chloe cried out, a fresh sheen of sweat breaking out on her forehead. I flung her hand away in disgust and pulled out a handkerchief to wipe my fingers. My eyes were cold enough to cause frostbite. Don't flatter yourself, I said, stepping back. I find you repulsive. I want you to sign a different kind of deal. I didn't give her a moment to recover. I tossed a contract at her feet. $200 million for a 51% controlling stake in the hospital. You will stay on as CEO, but for the next 3 years, you are required to increase net profits by 30% annually. If you fail, I pointed to the final clause. All of your remaining personal assets, this building, your jewelry, even you yourself, become my property. You will become my personal assistant. On call 24/7. No rights. No dignity. No escape. Chloe clutched her swollen wrist, her eyes wide with horror as she stared at the contract on the floor. It was an indenture agreement, a devil's bargain designed to turn her into my slave. I won't sign it, she shrieked. I'm a Vanderbilt. I will never sign something so humiliating. Really? I took out my phone and hit play. A frantic, tinny voice filled the room. It was a recording from the prison visitation line. Chloe, help me. These guys are going to kill me. The one with the scar on his face said, if he doesn't see the money by noon, he's going to cut off my hand. Chloe, I know you have money. Give me the money. Leo's desperate sobs echoed in my pristine office. The color drained from Chloe's face. That was recorded 10 minutes ago, I said, turning off the phone and smiling. It's now 10:15 a.m. I hear the man with the scar is very impatient. If you sign now, the wire transfer should hit his account by 10:30. If you're late, I made a sharp, cutting motion with my hand. Chloe was shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me as if I were a demon crawled up from the depths of hell. You're a monster, she whispered. Thank you, I said, holding out a pen. Sign it, CEO Vanderbilt. For your beloved cousin, what's a little humiliation? Her hand trembled as she took the pen. She knelt, her designer suit wrinkling on the cold floor, and picked up the contract. As she signed her name, a tear fell onto the page, smudging the ink. I watched her write the familiar signature. Once, she had signed our prenuptial agreement with such arrogance, a queen bestowing a favor upon a peasant. Now, she was signing away her life with abject humility, a subject bowing to her new king. Good. I took the contract, not bothering to glance at her. I walked back to my chair. Now, give me a glass of water. And remember how I like it. Spring water, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Not 1 degree more. Chloe remained frozen on the floor. Did you hear me? I looked up, my gaze cutting into her. She bit her lip so hard I thought she might draw blood. Then, slowly, painfully, she pushed herself to her feet and shuffled toward the water cooler like a condemned woman walking to the gallows. Watching her, I touched the scar on my brow. This is just the interest payment, Chloe. The principal is far, far from being paid in full. 10 a week after she signed the contract, I took Chloe to the prison. Ostensibly, it was a business visit. In reality, it was a public flogging. The maximum security prison was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by high walls and electric fences. The air stank of mold and cheap disinfectant. Chloe wore a nondescript trench coat and large sunglasses, trying to hide her identity. The moment we stepped into the visitation block, she gagged. God, this place reeks, she complained, covering her nose. I gave her a cold look. Leo has lived here for 3 years. She fell silent. Through the thick, bulletproof glass, two guards escorted Leo into the booth. 3 years had transformed the once dashing heir into something barely human. His head was shaved, his body was skeletal, and his face was a canvas of bruises. The moment he saw Chloe, his dead eyes flared with a desperate, manic light. Chloe, Chloe. He slammed his hands against the glass, grabbing the receiver. The money. Did you send the money? You have to get me out of here. I can't take another day. These people are animals. They beat me, they steal my food. Chloe, please, you have to save me. Seeing her cousin in this state, Chloe's tears started to fall. Now, I'm so sorry. She wept in her own receiver. The money has been sent. I'm working on getting you a medical transfer. Just hang in there a little longer. Hang in there? How am I supposed to hang in there? Leo raged, banging his fists on the glass. Do you have any idea what my life is like? And you? I saw you on the news. At some fancy party, in a designer dress. Have you forgotten all about me? No, of course not. I was there to raise money. Raise money. Leo's eyes suddenly darted to me, standing silently behind Chloe. I was wearing a bespoke suit and gold-rimmed glasses, the very picture of untouchable wealth and power. The contrast between us was staggering. Who's he? Leo pointed at me, his eyes filled with suspicion and envy. Your new boyfriend? Chloe, are you spending my money on some boy toy? Leo, stop it. Chloe snapped. This is Mr. Croft. He's the one who saved the company, and he's the one who paid off your debts. Leo blinked, and his entire demeanor shifted. The rage vanished, replaced by a pathetic, fawning grin. Mr. Croft. He pressed his face against the glass, showing off a row of yellowed teeth. Thank you, sir. You're a saint, a true savior. Sir, do you think you could spare a little more? I really need some cigarettes. They're so expensive in here. I looked at him. This was the man I had nearly sacrificed my life for. Utterly irredeemable. I stepped forward and took the receiver from Chloe's hand. Leo, I began, my voice low and steady. I hear you've been having nightmares. Leo flinched, his eyes darting away. How did you know? I also hear you feel like someone is always watching you from the shadows. I continued, staring into his eyes, a ghost of smile on my lips. The ghost of that delivery boy you killed, perhaps, and a ghost of your brother-in-law. At the words brother-in-law, Leo convulsed as if he'd been electrocuted. Stop it, he shrieked, clutching his head. I didn't kill him. He killed himself. It was his choice. Was it? I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, because I heard that the window in his room wasn't actually sealed shut that night. I heard that if you had just run inside, you might have been able to save him. That's a lie. It was welded shut. Leo screamed, his frantic denial exposing the truth of his cowardice. Julian, what are you talking about? Chloe, confused, tried to grab the receiver back. I blocked her, keeping my focus on Leo. You be a good boy in here, Leo. I'll make sure you're, well, taken care of. After all, your sister signed her entire life over to me just so you could have a smoke. What? Signed her life over? Leo's eyes went wide. He looked at Chloe, and a last shred of familial love was replaced by pure, calculating greed. Chloe, if you were the guy that rich, why can't you give me more? I want $1 million. $1 million. Or I'll tell the press that it was really you who... Leo. Chloe shrieked, her face ashen, cutting him off. I smiled and hung up the receiver. Mission accomplished. The seeds of resentment and doubt were sown. Leo would now see his sister not as his savior, but as a wealthy benefactor who was holding out on him. He would bleed her dry, and Chloe, tethered to this bottomless pit of need, would be driven ever closer to the breaking point. Let's go, Assistant Vanderbilt. I turned and walked away, ignoring Leo as he pounded on the glass behind me. Outside the prison gates, the sunlight was harsh. Chloe stumbled to the side of the road and threw up. I handed her a tissue. Feeling sick? I asked. She looked up at me, her eyes a storm of conflicting emotions. Why did you say those things to him? To show you the truth, I said, lighting a cigarette. The smoke dissipated in the wind. The family you're killing yourself to protect sees you as nothing more than an ATM. Was it worth it, Chloe? She stared at me, searching my face for any sign of mockery, but found only a placid calm. Strangely, that calmness felt safe. It doesn't matter if it was worth it, she said with a bitter laugh, leaning against the car. All her defenses were gone. He's the last male in the family line. My father made me promise to protect him on his deathbed. I never had a choice. You always have a choice, I said, my gaze intensifying. You could choose to align yourself with someone stronger. Someone like me. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. The wind whipped her hair across her face. In that moment, staring at the scar on my brow, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu. This cruel, heartless man who had systematically destroyed her life was, paradoxically, the only thing that felt solid in the wreckage. Julian, she reached out hesitantly, and her fingers brushed against my sleeve. Will you help me? I looked down at her hand. This time I didn't pull away. That depends on your performance, I said, opening the car door and getting into the back seat. Now drive. We're going back to the office. Chloe stood there for a moment. Then, with a new look of determination on her face, she got into the driver's seat. In the rearview mirror, I saw her quickly reapply her lipstick. The fish has taken a bait. 11 in the weeks that followed, Chloe transformed. She was no longer the imperious CEO of Vanderbilt Medical. She fully embraced her role as my personal assistant. She learned how to prepare my water to the precise temperature I demanded. She learned my exact culinary preferences. She even learned to anticipate my stress headaches and offer a massage before I even asked. She was trying to seduce me. It wasn't just about the contract anymore. It was a classic case of Stockholm Syndrome. I had stripped her of her power, her money, and her family. The tiny scraps of validation I offered her had become her only source of emotional stability. One night, a thunderstorm raged over the city. I was working late, which meant Chloe was too. Mr. Croft, it's getting late. Should I order dinner? She asked, entering my office. She carried a glass of warm milk and smelled faintly of expensive soap. I had allowed her the use of a small apartment attached to my office for her convenience. No need. I kept my eyes on the stock market data flickering across my screen. It was Vanderbilt Group stock. Under my careful manipulation, it had stabilized but was still critically low. Come here. My head is killing me. She walked behind my chair without a word. Her fingers were cool and firm as she massaged my temples. You're good at this, I remarked casually. Where did you learn? Her hands tensed for a fraction of a second. I used to do this for Ethan, she said softly, her voice wistful. He was always so tired after his surgeries. His head would hurt, so I learned a few techniques. I closed my eyes, a cold, bitter smile on my lips. A lie. Whenever I had a headache, she would tell me to take an aspirin and leave her alone. She had probably hired a professional masseuse in the last week to teach her this, all to please me. But I didn't call her on it. You loved him very much? I asked. I did, she whispered, her voice sounding distant. I didn't realize how much until he was gone. No one will ever love me the way he did. Is that so? My eyes snapped open. I grabbed her wrist and pulled. With a small cry of surprise, she tumbled into my lap. I wrapped an arm around her waist, holding her in place. Our faces were inches apart. Outside, thunder cracked, masking the sound of her frantic heartbeat. Then look at me, I said, removing my glasses. My eyes, Ethan's eyes, stared directly into hers. Who's better, me or him? Chloe panicked, staring into my eyes. That overwhelming sense of familiarity washed over her again. The face was different, the voice was different, but the eyes, the way I had just grabbed her wrist, even a faint scent of antiseptic that always clung to me beneath the expensive cologne. It was all him. J. Julian. Her face was flushed, but her body had gone soft in my arms. She wasn't fighting me. Please don't. Don't what? I leaned in, my lips brushing against the soft skin of her neck. Isn't this what you want? Admit it, Chloe. You're using me as his replacement. That single sentence shattered her last defense. Her body was racked with a violent tremor. It was true. On a subconscious level, she had already turned me into a reincarnation of Ethan. The intensity of my hatred for her mirrored the intensity of his love. That all-consuming, obsessive focus, whether it was love or hate, it was attention, and she was starving for it. No, she breathed, but her hands clutched at the front of my shirt. No? Then why is your heart beating so fast? My hand slid down her back, coming to rest in the small of it, a place I knew was intensely sensitive for her. A soft gasp escaped her lips. Julian, her eyes were glazed over. She finally surrendered, resting her head on my shoulder. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Can you just hold me? The once invincible queen was now a lost, shivering kitten, begging for a moment of warmth, even if it came from the devil himself. I didn't hold her. I stared out at the rain-streaked window, letting her tremble in my arms. You want me to hold you? I whispered in her ear, my voice as soft and dangerous as the wolf in a fairy tale. I can, but that, Chloe, will cost you extra. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. What's the price? The truth, I said, my gaze pinning her. Tell me what really happened that night. The night the power went out. I want to hear every detail. From you. Chloe's pupils constricted. She was trapped. On one side, the comfort and security she desperately craved. On the other, the secret that could send her to prison for life. I was betting on her weakness. I was betting that, right now, her need for emotional connection would outweigh her instinct for self-preservation. She opened her mouth, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was Leo. He only had that one chance. And I never thought Ethan would. Shoo. I placed a finger on her lips. In my pocket, a digital recorder was silently running. Tell me everything, I coaxed. Tell me every single detail from that night. And if you do, I'll stay with you tonight. It was an offer she couldn't refuse. On this stormy night, in this office that was haunted by the ghost of Ethan Hayes, she was desperate for someone, anyone, to chase away the nightmares that had plagued her for 3 years. Chloe closed her eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. And then, she began to talk. She told me everything. How she had personally thrown the master breaker. How she had watched the patient's heartbeat flatline on the monitor. She spoke slowly, her voice breaking with every new confession. And I listened. I listened like a patient priest, hearing the sins of a repentant sinner. But in my hand, I wasn't holding a rosary. I was holding the knife I was about to drive into her heart. 12, I didn't touch Chloe that night. After I had the full confession on tape, I pushed her off my lap. A fascinating story, I said, standing up and smoothing the wrinkles from my shirt. The warmth in my eyes was gone, replaced by a glacial cold. But I just remembered I have a video conference with Hong Kong. You're dismissed for the night, Assistant Vanderbilt. Chloe stared at me, dumbfounded. It was as if she had been thrown from the top of a skyscraper. The shame, the humiliation, the raw rejection, it was too much. Julian, you played me? She screamed, her nails digging into the leather of the sofa. I told you everything. Why are you? Because you suddenly disgust me, I said, looking down at her. Do you know why? Because when you were telling me how you murdered that boy, there was fear in your voice, but not a single shred of remorse. You, Chloe, are rotten to the core. I walked out of the office without a backward glance, leaving her to her screams and the sound of breaking glass. Outside, the rain had stopped. I sat in my car and played back the recording. I had her, but I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. Prison would be an escape for her. I wanted her to fall from the highest pinnacle of hope. I wanted her to die alone, abandoned by everyone she had ever known. Over the next month, I began to close the net. First, Vanderbilt Medical. Using the unlimited access Chloe had granted me, I systematically transferred all of the hospital's core assets, patents, research, even its best doctors, to a shell corporation I owned. All that was left of Vanderbilt Medical was an empty building and a mountain of debt. Next, Leo. My friends in the prison went to work. They told Leo that his sister was living it up on the outside, that she was planning to marry the mysterious Julian Croft, liquidate her remaining assets, and move overseas, leaving him to rot. Leo snapped. He wrote a letter to the district attorney, a confession written in his own blood, detailing every crime the Vanderbilts had ever committed, including the full story of the surgical accident and years of tax evasion, all in a desperate bid to reduce his own sentence. Finally, Chloe herself. I began a campaign of psychological torture. One day, I would take her to the most exclusive restaurants, buy her extravagant gifts, and make her believe I was falling for her. The next, I would ghost her for days, sending her into a spiral of anxiety and self-doubt. It was brutally effective. Chloe became my puppet. Her entire emotional state was tied to my whims. She spent her days trying to please me, even going so far as to offer up the last of her personal fortune for me to invest. And then, the day came. The anniversary of my death. 3 years ago today, Ethan Hayes had died in that fire. Chloe called me early in the morning. She was dressed in black, on her way to the cemetery. Mr. Croft, I need to take a personal day, she said, her voice timid over the phone. Today is the anniversary. Granted, I said coolly. As it happens, I have an appointment as well. After you're done at the cemetery, meet me at the old St. Jude's home in Queens. St. Jude's? She asked, confused. What are we doing there? I have a surprise for you. I hung up. The old St. Jude's home for children. The place Chloe had once threatened to demolish. I had bought it last year and had it completely renovated. I stood on the playground, watching the children on the swings. The old director sat in his wheelchair nearby. His mind was starting to go, but he was in good spirits. Ethan, my boy, he said, grabbing my hand, his cloudy eyes filled with tears. You came back. I knew you weren't dead. They all said you were dead, but I never believed them. I knelt and tucked the blanket around his legs. I'm back, Grandpa, I said, smiling. I came back to catch the bad guys. In the distance, a black town car pulled up. Chloe got out. She was still holding the bouquet of white lilies she had intended to leave at Ethan's grave. When she saw the newly renovated building, the happy children, the old director in his wheelchair, and me, standing with my back to her in the middle of the playground, she froze. A primal fear, a dread she had never known, seized her. Julian, she called out tentatively. I turned around slowly. I wasn't wearing my glasses. I hadn't bothered to cover the scar. I was wearing the same style of simple, white button-down shirt I had worn 3 years ago. I looked at her and I smiled. It wasn't Julian Croft's cruel smirk. It was the gentle, kind, and utterly deadly smile of Ethan Hayes. Hello, Chloe, I said in my own voice. Long time no see. I hear you've missed me. The lilies slipped from her fingers and scattered on the ground. 13 The wind died on the playground at St. Jude's. Chloe stood amidst the fallen white lilies, petrified, as if she'd been struck by lightning. Her lips trembled violently. Her pupils were blown wide. Her face a grotesque mask of shock, terror, and dawning madness. Ethan. The sound that escaped her throat was a strangled gasp, barely human. I stood by the swing set, giving an empty seat a gentle push. It swayed back and forth, its chains creaking rhythmically. What's the matter? Don't you recognize me? I began to walk toward her, my shoes crunching on the dry autumn leaves. Or do you prefer the version of me that was burned to a crisp in that fire? No, it's impossible. Chloe stumbled backward, her heel catching in the grass. You're dead. I saw you. I saw the body, the ring. The DNA report confirmed it was you. Money makes the world go round, Chloe. Isn't that the first lesson you ever taught me? I stopped a few feet from her, my hands in my pockets, my gaze terrifyingly calm. For the right price, a corrupt medical examiner can make a DNA report say anything you want. As for the body, just an unclaimed John Doe from the med school morgue. He was kind enough to borrow my ring and cry your tears for me. You're Julian Croft. You're Julian, she insisted, a desperate edge to her voice, pointing a shaking finger at my scar. Your face, your voice. The man who's been with me for 3 years is Julian Croft. It can't be you. Julian Croft is Ethan Hayes. Ethan Hayes is Julian Croft, I said, tracing the scar above my eye. I got this face so I could come back and collect the debt you owe. As for the voice, a little training, a few damaged vocal cords from smoke inhalation, anyone can change. I took another step forward. She took another step back until the trunk of an old oak tree stopped her retreat. You seem to love Julian so much these past few months, didn't you? You were so desperate to get into his bed. I leaned in, my face inches from hers, savoring the abject terror in her eyes. What's wrong? Now that you know I'm the fiancé you condemned to hell, are you scared? Aya! Chloe let out a primal scream, sinking to the ground and clawing at her hair. Stop it. Stop talking. You're a ghost. You're a ghost come back for revenge. I am a ghost, I said, squatting down to her level. But I'm not here to haunt you. I'm here to take back what's mine. I took out my phone and played a video. It was a news report showing Vanderbilt Medical being swarmed by creditors. Then, a clip of federal agents raiding the Vanderbilt estate. And finally, a shot of Victoria being led away in handcuffs by Interpol agents in Switzerland. I had sold her location to them weeks ago. Do you see? I held the screen in front of her face. Your company, your money, your family's precious name, it's all gone. You have nothing left. Chloe stared at the screen, her eyes vacant. Why? She whispered. I loved you. I was going to give you everything. Why would you do this to me? Love. A raw, incredulous laugh escaped me. You call that obsession, that need for control, love? You never loved me, Chloe. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a loyal pet, a beautiful object you could show off and control. If you had felt one shred of love for me, you wouldn't have cut the power that night. If you had an ounce of a conscience, you wouldn't have tried to frame me. If you were even remotely human, you wouldn't have threatened to destroy this orphanage. I stood up, towering over her, my voice turning to ice. Your love is a filthy, poisonous thing, and I want no part of it. Just then, the screech of tires filled the air. Several police cars swarmed the entrance to the home. Their flashing lights painted the playground in strokes of red and blue. The officers who got out weren't local cops. They were from the major crimes and financial crimes divisions. The detective in charge was the same one who had worked my fire case. He saw me, and a look of shock, then profound understanding, crossed his face. Chloe Vanderbilt, the detective said, stopping in front of her and holding out a warrant. You are under arrest for suspicion of felony murder, obstruction of justice, financial fraud, and multiple other charges. Chloe looked up numbly at the silver handcuffs. She didn't resist. She didn't even speak. She just stared at me, the last flicker of light in her eyes finally extinguishing. Ethan, as they pulled her to her feet and led her away, she looked over her shoulder and gave a broken, tragic smile. You're right. I don't know what love is. But the biggest regret of my life wasn't killing that boy or framing you. It was not running into that fire to pull you out myself. The car door slammed shut. The sirens wailed, fading into the distance. I stood there, watching until the car was gone. There was no victory, no triumph, just a vast, hollow emptiness. The director wheeled himself over and patted my hand. It's over, son, he said gently. Let it go. I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The sun was bright enough to make your eyes water. You're right, Grandpa, I whispered. The sun is finally out. 14 in custody, Chloe didn't confess. She hired the best defense attorney in the state and pleaded not guilty. In court, she maintained the air of a wronged Vanderbilt heiress, insisting her older sister, Victoria, had made all the decisions and that she was merely an unwitting pawn. As for the medical accident, she blamed it on faulty hospital equipment. Her composure was remarkable. Even now, she was fighting. Then came the day of the trial. I was the prosecution's star witness. The moment I walked into the courtroom, the gallery erupted. The same reporters and citizens who had first condemned me, then mourned me, now stared in stunned silence at the ghost who had returned from the grave. I took the witness stand and calmly recounted the events of that night. But my testimony alone wasn't enough. Most of the physical evidence was long gone. Does the defense have any questions for the witness? The judge asked. Chloe's lawyer stood, radiating confidence. Your Honor, my client may have made some morally questionable decisions, but there is no direct evidence that she ordered the power to be shut off. The prosecution's audio recording is of dubious origin, was obtained illegally, and should be inadmissible. Chloe sat at the defendant's table, her back straight. She looked at me with a glimmer of defiance. You're back, so what? You can't prove a thing. I smiled. Her arrogance was about to be her downfall. Your Honor, I said, raising my hand. The prosecution would like to call a new witness to the stand. The courtroom doors opened. 2 bailiffs escorted a man in a prison jumpsuit to the stand. He was shackled at the wrists and ankles. It was Leo. The moment Chloe saw him, her mask of composure finally shattered. This was a blow she hadn't anticipated. Leo, she whispered, horrified. He didn't even look at her. He shuffled to the witness stand, his eyes burning with a cold, reptilian hatred. Months of prison brutality, fueled by my carefully planted lies that his sister had abandoned him, had curdled the last drop of affection he had for her. Witness, please state your name and your relationship to the defendant. Leo licked his chapped lips and spoke into the microphone. My name is Leo Vance, and I'm here to make a deal. His voice was a raw, grating sound. 3 years ago, there was no accident. It was my sister, Chloe Vanderbilt. I saw her pull the master switch myself. The courtroom exploded. Chloe shot to her feet. Now, what are you saying? I'm your sister. My sister. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with venom. Would my sister steal all my money, live a life of luxury, and let me get my leg broken in a prison riot? Will my sister sell our family's legacy to her new boyfriend and leave me to die in here? He held up his cuffed hands, pointing at her. Your Honor, I have proof. I was panicking that night, but I was also stupid. I had my phone out recording. I was going to post a video of the surgery to my social media to look cool, but I ended up recording the whole damn crime. What? Chloe swayed on her feet, grabbing the table for support. She had planned for everything, except for the one variable she never took seriously, her idiotic, clout-chasing cousin. I deleted the video, but it automatically backed up to the cloud. Leo shouted, I've already given the password to the DA. It's ironclad. I want a deal. I want a reduced sentence. As the video, buried for 3 years, played on the courtroom monitors, it was all over. The footage was shaky, but it clearly showed Chloe's cold, determined face and captured her voice, clear as a bell. Cut the power. If anything happens, it's on Ethan. Dead silence, followed by a roar of outrage from the gallery. Chloe collapsed in her chair, her face the color of ash. She had lost, betrayed not by her enemy, but by the very person she had sacrificed everything to protect. This was the end I had designed for her. Being sent to prison by me would have been a victory of sorts. She could have clung to her hatred of me, but to be destroyed by the person she loved most, that was a despair from which there was no recovery. I looked at the woman in the defendant's box, once a queen, now a broken shell. I felt nothing. I thought of the 18-year-old boy on my operating table. I thought of the man named Ethan Hayes who burned in a fire. Justice, I thought, may be slow, but it always arrives. The cost of its delay, however, was a price I would carry forever. 15. The verdict came down. Chloe Vanderbilt was found guilty of second-degree murder, corporate fraud, and a litany of other charges. She was sentenced to death, suspended pending a life sentence without the possibility of parole. For his testimony, Leo Vance's sentence was reduced to 15 years. Victoria Vanderbilt was extradited from Switzerland and would face her own justice. The Vanderbilt Group was officially bankrupt. Its assets were seized and liquidated to pay its debts and compensate its victims. The Vanderbilt dynasty, once a titan of New York society, was now nothing but a footnote in a true crime textbook. A month later, I visited Chloe in prison. It was the last time. Her hair was cut short, and she wore a plain gray jumpsuit. She was so thin she looked like a skeleton, and she seemed to have aged 20 years. The arrogant fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a dull, cloudy emptiness. She wasn't surprised to see me. You came, she said, her voice a dry rasp. I came, I confirmed, sitting down opposite her. To say goodbye. Ethan, she said my name, then gave a bitter smile. I've been thinking. If things had been different, if the power had never gone out that night, if we had gotten married, what do you think our lives would be like now? There are no what-ifs, I said, cutting off her fantasy. The moment you decide that another person's life is worth less than your own convenience, the end of the story is already written. She was silent for a long time. Do you still hate me? She finally asked. No, I said, shaking my head. Hate is exhausting. You're nothing to me now, just a number in the system, a stranger. A single tear rolled down her cheek. My indifference was a crueler punishment than any hatred. It meant she no longer existed in my world, not even as a villain. Ethan, she pressed her hand against the glass that separated us, her body shaking with sobs. I am sorry. I am so sorry. If there's a next life, don't talk about a next life, I said, standing up and straightening my coat. People like us? We should hope we never, ever meet again. I turned and walked away. Her gut-wrenching sobs followed me down the long, empty corridor. It was the sound of a soul finally, truly confessing its sins. I didn't look back. Outside the prison gates, a light snow had begun to fall. It was the first snow of the winter. The flakes melted on my shoulders, cold and clean. A black car was waiting for me. The window rolled down, and the old director from St. Jude smiled at me. Ethan, my boy, let's go home, he said. It's getting cold. I made pot roast. I looked at his kind face, then up at the swirling snow. The weight I had carried in my chest for 3 years finally crumbled into dust. "I'm coming, Grandpa." I got in the car. It pulled away from the curb, driving toward a future I had never thought I would live to see.